We are now in the continuing this piece of Sod Yishorim on the Torah, Parshas Shoftim. I just happen to have a capability of doing a little application of the first principle that we learned 2 weeks ago. Actually, this week we had a Hachnasa Sefer Torah in the yeshiva, and it was very, very beautiful and very nice, and people were dancing and clapping. Mamash, it looks like a Simchas Torah. And I was standing at the side and thinking. And so they were asking me, why aren't you dancing? He says, I have to think about something. Well, today I walked into Shir and I said, I'd like to tell you share what I was thinking about. You know, I've learned all my life to never do anything before you think about it. You know, why are you doing it? And what does it express? Literally, this piece that we just learned, we learned 2 weeks ago over here, to be a shofet, to assess what you're doing before you're doing it, and to have a value system and act according to a well thought out value system. So I was standing there and saying, why do you want to dance? And the obvious answer, well, what do you mean? It's covered HaTorah. So I says, well, do I dance every time I hear a Svar Reb Kiveger? Do I dance every time, rejoice, like, wow, jump and dance every time I understand the Taisvus? And the answer is a flat no. So why do you want to dance now? And it took me probably a half an hour to come to whatever conclusions I came to, which is really my private life, nothing to do with anybody here. And then I went into that circle and danced for 10 minutes. I'm trying to say that this is what we learned 2 weeks ago, the idea of shoftim, the person has to be a shofet. Literally, you ask yourself why before you do it, and then it's really meaningful. And you don't just jump into the fray, like, you know what I mean? For example, I'm going to give an example. For example, you know, we all stand up for the Mishaberch, for the Medina, you know, on Shabbos. Why? Why am I standing up? I mean, I'm asking serious questions. Why aren't you standing up for your Kippur cut? Why are you standing? And everything has to be asked. And I think it's so important. This is the piece that we're learning. If we want to succeed with our Bechira, if we want to succeed and not after says, oops, I didn't mean it, instead I start saying Slach Lanu every month, but actually trying to succeed in our Bechira, the only way to do it, as the Rebbe writes over here, is to be a shofet. You have to have a clear value system in which, while you try your best to apply it in certain situations beforehand, and sometimes it's not that easy to do. For example, I'm going to say jumping around by Achnasa Sefer Torah. And I would look at all these people jumping and dancing. I said, Mamish, it looks like they must be very happy people. Am I sad? I'm not sad. Believe me, I'm a lot of fun. Okay, so what is it? And the answer is because I decided I don't want to do it before I really know why I'm doing it and what it means. And it's something I won't be ashamed of myself for. And it took me a long time. So here you have an example of the Kiyum Mitzvah of Shoftim, B'Shoftim Titun L'Chot, to be a Shofet, to judge yourself before you do anything. I just want to make that as a remark. I put it as a challenge to my Bachrim today before Shir. I says, I wanted everybody to sit down on themselves and write down, why was I hopping around by Moshe Emes for Tirasei Emes? Like, what does the word Emes mean? And why did it excite you more than, I don't know what? Is it because that's what everybody does? So then tell me that. So then you're nothing more than the cows in Kibbutz Yavne. You do things out of habit and intuition. Is there any seichel that leads your life? And the answer, well, I hate to say what the answer probably is going to be, but I asked them to please write a piece of paper. And if there's anything which is really meaningful, please send it to me. I'm not, you know, I highly doubt that anyone's going to send anything to me. But the idea behind it was very clear. It's called Pishpush B'maisim. And Pishpush B'maisim does not mean to say, oh, I did something wrong, I did something good. The Aleph Sheba Aleph is, why did you do anything? And that's a serious question. So let's move on. The Rebbe writes here, I'm in the first page of Sod Yeshorim, al Torah Vashishaytim, the left column. So he says, I'm going to just read the second line. The principle is that you must have your thought process devoid of any partiality. Only then, here you have thought belita'ut, and then you can assess why you're doing things. In other words, when you start to challenge and you want to do something, should I do it? The odds are you'll find out some kind of rationale that you should, and therefore your bechir won't work. But if you think before you do anything, and specifically if you set up a value system with applied scenarios and make decisions prior to their occurrence, but literally in such a situation, what would I do and why would I do it? You think about it before, then the odds are you will succeed in your bechira much more than you would succeed if you're trying to make the decision while you're driven with a passion for wanting to do things. Usually at that stage, your brain monitor is on a flat line. You're not thinking, you're running. And they always say oops afterwards. I mean, the chachma is to say oops before and not to say oops afterwards. So then he continues. This is what we need now in the third line. After the person has attained somewhat of a control of mind prior to thought, to speech, action, and halavai, even thought, and here I want to elaborate on what this means. There is something missing in people, and people Jews specifically are constantly fidgeting. And here I want to go to a piece of something that we had. It's in your Makomos. It's in your Makomos. If you look carefully, there's a piece of Sod Yeshorim. Sod Yeshorim on Erev Yom Kippur. It should be. Let's see if I have it here. I have it here. Right. It's a piece of Sod Yeshorim and Erev Yom Kippur. If you look at it, where he describes something which is very important. It's another the same author, but it's on Erev Yom Kippur, and it says as follows. He quotes a Midrash Tehillim. This is the Sod Yeshorim on Erev Yom Kippur. You should have it. It's and it starts by Dabar Hashem Moshe Leimor Ach Basol LaChodesh Hashviu Yom Kippurim Hu Mikra Kodesh Mikra Yehu Mikra Kodesh Yalachem V'Nisemet Nafshotechem. You should basically fast. See, the pasuk says in Tehillim, Bitchu B'ay B'chol Eis. Trust him constantly. Nation Shifchu Lefanav Levavchem. Pour your hearts out in front of him. Isal Zebe Midrash, the Medrash says in Midrash Tehillim, Perik Samach Bet. Here's what I want to read. Hanishama Azot, this soul of ours, Kol Sha'ah, at every point in time, Hi Ola V'yoredet Baguf. She is going up, she wants out, and then she comes back. She goes out, she's Ratzot B'Shov. I want out, I'll stay. I want out, I'll stay. She's fidgeting. The soul is not comfortable in the body. She wants to leave. And then it says, but suddenly, in the midst of its fidgeting, it realized that God's glory is all over the world that he's experiencing. And she recoils, she comes back and settles. It seems to be saying here, quoting the Midrash, that the soul is very uncomfortable in this world. And this is what the pasuk says in Mishlei, "Va'nefesh lo timalei." The nefesh will never be fulfilled. Chazal say, "She'imel yoinim," for she is of the celestial beings, and the guf is betachtoinim of the earthy, mundane beings, and she's not in a place that she's comfortable with. This is obviously the idea of this Vakesh L'tzet B'chol Eid. What does this mean? Well, can you imagine a great philosopher or a great thinker? Oh, let's think of a big Talmud Chacham, Reb Soloveitchik, and all of a sudden he's thrown into some kind of situation, and all he can do is be a kindergarten teacher. I would imagine he would be terribly fidgeting and nervous and frustrated. Where's all of him expressed there? I mean, with greatest respect, at the most he could sing "Ring Around the Rosie," and he probably wasn't that good at it, if you know it. So, terribly frustrated. I'm out of place. This is not where I should be. And he's looking for some kind. So either get out to show me some kind of justification that I can realize what I am. Well, the soul feels the same way. What is the soul? The soul is basically some celestial creation, expression of God, thus a creation of God. And its consciousness is nothing more than I am nothing more than a derivative of God. When you say chelik eluka mimao, chelik, there is a thing called a fraction of God. There is no fraction of infinity. It means that the consciousness of the soul is that it is nothing more than an expression of God. Just want us to understand when you say the word God is not a fractured entity which can be cut down to little pieces of God, which is what's very nice, but I hate to say that is mamish an ancient kfira. No, Kamima is a nice way of saying it experiences itself as nothing more than an expression of God. That's what it means. Okay, that's what it is. And all of a sudden, expression of the infinite, all of a sudden I'm stuck in this mundane reality with my consciousness as the action. It doesn't even fit where I am. It doesn't fit where I am. What am I doing here? It's Gulliver being stuck with the Lilliputians. What's he going to do? He feels terrible. Okay, he wants out, not comfortable. Until he realizes there's a certain understanding of God that he can only find in the Lilliput world that he'll never realize. For example, understanding the depths, the profundity of the human soul, where it can attain in its levels of consciousness. For example, I always love reading on Tisha B'Av. My habit is to read on Tisha B'Av Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust by Dr. Yafa Elyach, which describes the experiences of the Bluzhever Rebbe, B'Sol Shpira, in the terrible work camps and concentration camps of Poland. It's a tremendous Musar book for me. And then suddenly you see what a Jew can become, how they can say Shechiyona v'Kimona v'Giyona l'Zman hazeh, when they got together to light some kind of, I don't even know, it was a halachic Hanukkah candle, knowing that they may be shot the next morning. And you suddenly realize the importance of life to a Jew, the importance of a mitzvah to a Jew, the importance of a closeness to a Jew. And you suddenly realize what a person is and what he can attain in this mundane mud house called the body. And this is, wow, God's glory even goes down to that level. That's unbelievable. It's like you see ideas of humanity dafka in the most primitive, smallest places possible. It reminds me of Stanley when he met Livingston. He said, "Oh, Dr. Livingston, I presume you're actually here." You know what I mean? This is what is happening here. So the soul encounters a certain covered shamayim, a certain grasp of covered shamayim that it wouldn't have grasped up there. Forget dafka b'tachtonim. It suddenly experiences godliness. This is wow. That is a unique havana in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which I wouldn't even get in Olam Ha'elyon. Well, what do you plan to do in Olam Ha'elyon? I hate to tell it to you. There's nothing more there than sitting around and getting deeper and deeper understanding of God. That's what it is. Tzadikim yoishu materisem bereishem v'nenem miziv hashchina. You have the pleasure of Havana v'asaga. Well, we say to the boys, can you imagine? They're only going to give you Havana v'asaga within the material that you accumulated in this world. If you only learned 5 Blatten Bobakama and 6 Blatten Bobametzia, brother dear, when God shows Kavod Shamayim found in the 11th Blatten Bobakama, you're out. You're not in that class. You'll be bored perpetually. There's no way. You really have to finish Shas and know it. Where's your time to go? Olam Haba going to be? Olam Haba going to be? Your Olam Haba is going to be a Gehenim. So just investing in the future, you have to learn something. So what do you get? It's Hanoas HaSaga. Okay, so what's the Hanoas HaSaga? There's a certain Hanoas HaSaga of the Neshama in this world, which you can't accomplish in somewhere else. And when that is understood here, then wow, what's up there is crazy and unbelievable. The depth of that is the profound. Finding the greatness of God in the pits, finding humanity in the drug-ridden ghettos of Bedford-Stuyvesant, finding religiosity in the antithesis of religion and belief, in Auschwitz, Majdanek, etc., and things like that, brother dear, there you found something. There you found covered Shemayim, and now the Havana Asaga of that in El Yonim will be profound of the profoundest. That's what this writes here. Neshama Azoisko Shashi Oilev Yeredes Baguf Mevakeshes Lotzes Min Adam. She wants out. She's a Gulliver. She's stuck in the world of Lilliputs. V'ro'asha Kadosh Baruch Hu Meloch Kol Ha'aretz Kvodo. He realizes God really is, wow, in the weirdest places, and she sits down, she's complacent, she's happy where she is, she stops fidgeting. God thrust forward through, or Yikarot Gadol, beautiful and very specially charmed enlightenments, or means the capability of understanding, enlightenment. In multitudes of things which are engarmented, you must see the inside of it, and in hidden realities which you must open their door. There's even place you could say, you see a world which assures, it tells me, wow, there is no there's no God. Yes, there's that consciousness too. Now, where is the covered Shemaim I can crack and find in that situation? Well, there is. And everybody, you and me and all of us, have a certain covered Shemaim that we are ultimately supposed to find. And we're supposed to be Megala. There's certain covered Shemaim which you can understand that no one before you understood and no one after you will understood. It is only yours. It is your depth of falling. It was your mind, your mindset, your cultural baggage, and that which you will experience in Havana and Kavod Shammai. And we understand the whole reason for creation, is the Ramban writes in Parshas Bayis, Sheyeda ha'adam ki hakel bor'o v'yodelo al kach. Each person has his own Yedias Elokim, that who bor'oi, this is God created this reality. And he sees him there, and he acquiesces, he had said, he agrees that this is what it really is. So everybody has to find something. It's in light of this that we say that every soul is fidgeting. Yes, hanefesh lo temalei, it is really fidgeting. I don't know what my goal is. How many times have I been asked, how do I know what my shlichut is? How do I know what God expects of me? Well, what first thing you must understand, you must take for granted that yes, you're fidgeting. You don't know. And you somehow, your experiences, in them lies the covered Shemaim that you must understand. And the reason you're fidgeting, because you're not finding that place which is yours. You're looking at other people's covered Shemaim. I want to be a X. You're not X. X was born in Vilna and was not a Yankee fan. You were. You were born, I don't know where, in Chicago, Illinois. So why are you trying to find someone else's covered Shemaim? It's about tashkis on your mother's morning sickness. You were supposed to be born in your situation with your koifis and your chisoinus, and you're supposed to find that covered Shemaim, which is shaykh to your avodah, and you're supposed to make all of that. That's your, it's your mosaic, your little rock in the great mosaic of history. So how do you know? So he says something unbelievable. He says, let's go back to the primary book, please. You can do all the mitzvahs and all the ma'asim tovim, and you're still fidgeting. Hanefesh lo temalei will not be satiated. Lefi she'imel yoinim. Tefillin and talis and tzitzis are not going to do it unless that's your thing. We know that there's also a reality that certain mitzvahs are part of your covered Shema. The Gemara says that when Amora asked the other, Avuch b'mad zoyer tzvei, your father, what was his favorite mitzvah that he was very, very, very careful about? I always used to look at Rav Scheinberg and says, I guess he was here for tzitzis. He had this obsessive love of tzitzis. He put on piles of tzitzis. Obviously, that's what he wanted to do. He fulfilled. He didn't. There's no din to do what he did. It had no chayva, nishke mitzvahs, garnished. He didn't. The only idea of putting on tzitzis, baggage of Arba Kampis, is only because if you don't, and God is angry, He will look at you. Why didn't you care about the mitzvah? But to put on beged, agabe beged, which Lamaisim is stomach shalei kidech levishason. I highly doubt that the upper layer was a key mitzvah of tzitzis and levisha. But he did it because that's what he wanted to do, because somehow that idea of Isa was the Chakim, what he was connected to. I'm surprised he didn't wallpaper his house with tzitzis. That was his Kvod Shemayim that he was into. Obviously, he must have learned Perik HaTchelis a million times. Every person has a favorite, but most people have to find it mitzvahs and Kvod Shemayim. What must it do with a profession? What must it do with anything in this life? So he says, you can do all the mitzvahs in the world, you'll still be fidgeting. He brings the medrash. It says there are three which are never totally filled, which is the yam, although it's full, and yet somehow it keeps on filling up. This is a mashal which I won't discuss in the whole time. What does this mean? So here he says something which is unbelievably, it's an eitzah g'dayla ma'od. How do you know what you should be doing? At least know to the amount that we can know. So first I'm going to show you something interesting and a few other sources, and then we'll take it from there. The Ma'aseh, there's another source. You should have it. It's a Mea Shiloach. Mea Shiloach is the grandfather of this author. He's dealing with the Nisayon of Yehuda and his daughter-in-law Tamar, which Chazal say, Amalach Hamamuna ala Taiva, the angel which deals with obsessive desires, who dachmasai, he pushed him into the arms of Tamar. Now, come on, there was no little round, roly-poly, red-cheeked with gossamer wings pushing him. That's a metaphor. Hamalach Hamamuna ala Taiva literally means he had an obsessive desire, a desire that he could not overcome. Is that negative? Is that positive? What does it mean that he had a God? Malach means it was God sent. Malach is a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, God inserted in him a certain obsessive desire, which he felt he could not overcome. Thus, he followed it. Ich verstehe nicht. Yehuda, a Navi, a Shiftei Ka. He didn't learn Shari Chudra, Beni Yoina. He didn't know to stand on the Iskafia. What do you mean? A type that he can't overcome? I don't understand. That doesn't fit well with an art scroll book. If they would write a biography of Gedalim, they wouldn't put Yehuda and Motzei Dalat Torah together with, I don't know, whatever names there are over there. It's Amalach HaMamuna ala Taiva Dochmasoi. What's the pshat? So let's read the underlined things here found in the Mea Shiloach. If you have it, it's Mea Shiloach, side Mem Zayin, the third line. Ube'emes liYehuda b'maaseh de Tamar. The truth of the matter is when we talk about Yehuda in the story of Tamar. And we look at all the different stories and occurrences within Shevet Yehuda. He's talking about David HaMelech's life, etc. Boaz's life. What do we say? For example, the idea that Boaz fell over heads over heels over this Moabite convert called Ruth, or that David did what happened with Bathsheba. Should we go on and on? They seem to be doing actions which don't really fit with a art scroll bio, to say the least. It is God which inserted in them an obsessive desire so strong that it was not even expected that they could overcome that because it was such an obsessive desire that there's no way you're out of it. One cannot therefore say that he's responsible. Why did he not do that? Now, what happened here? What happened here is I want you to go down to the following paragraph in that line where there's underlined words. The root reality of Shevet Yehuda is because he looked to God in every action that he does. Although he sees where logic should be taken, it doesn't mean here halacha. Didn't mean to say where logic, we say ein onshim min hadin. It means logic. It means where logic should be taking you. He looks to God. There are many times in halacha, for example, where we know the din is going to be so and so and so. Although we know you have a basic intuition that the din emes is that this is a mishpat meruma and the truth lies with Reuven, not with Shimon. Just technically, I do not have legal proof, and therefore the halacha is going to be yachleiku or kol dalim govar or whatever it's going to be. The Rama passes the halacha that if you basically have that intuition, if before you made that decision, if you can, you should walk away from the mishpat. You shouldn't get involved in it. In other words, the crowd is when you say dan din emes, it means to say, what does God really want me to do in this situation? What is the truth of the matter? Not what is the legal law that logic and system demands. What should I be doing in this junction, in this situation? It could be that the ruling of law may be accurate and true. According to the claims of the litigants, but it's not the absolute truth of what really happened, and thus you're doing the right thing, but it's not the good thing because no reality. What's happening here? A Brahmai is going to be maskir, soicher, is going to be win. So he says. One could claim a lying claim. This applies also in all avenues in life. Many times we have rulings that we must do, the right thing to do, but what we're looking for is to understand what is Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So obviously, when we have no other capability, the halacha is God says, "Without you do X." Okay, it's very simple. Like everybody can tell me, well, what does the Kadosh Baruch Hu want? He wants everybody to learn Torah Yom V'Layla, and true, emes, Magisri Yom V'Layla, it's emes. Okay, if you're like Shimon Bar Yochai, also b'yadai, and if not, you can become a businessman, a lawyer, a doctor, or a rebbe in the school, or a rav, or a rosh yeshiva. They're all working. I've told guys a million times, I learn sometimes less during the day now than I did if I would be a successful lawyer. What do I get? I get 6 hours a day. That's my max. I might have had a good parnasa, so I'd be a good lawyer with a big mouth, would have made a lot of money, and also would have learned 6 hours a day. The answer is whatever it be. No, I followed whatever reason I did to what I was supposed to do. It's not that I'm a Mekayim mitzvahs Talmud Torah of Agis for Yom V'Layla 24/7. It's not emes. I'm a Mekayim other mitzvahs. One of the mitzvahs is L'Lamed Torah. It's a nice mitzvah, but that's not the mitzvah Lilmoy Torah and Yediyas Torah. That's not Vishinantam. Sheyidiv Torah Mechudadim Beficha. It's not Yediyas Torah. It's not Yediyas Torah. Let me tell you, to teach Merubah, for me, it's like I do it blindly walking in the park. Okay, you know what I mean? Do me a favor, at least you guys should learn, I don't know what uktzin. I didn't do it that many times, okay? You don't know, but I do it. So which mitzvah? That's not mitzvah limud, I'll tell you. That's, why am I doing this? Why am I drawn to this? And you know what? Here's the question is, but you look for what does God want me to do in given situations. How do you make that decision? He does not just do it out of a habit. They're dancing, so I'm going to dance too. It's a time for simcha, and it's a Rambam, and you're going to give me all the right lines, and I know the cliches. And I look at you and say, yes, I'm doing it not out there. I'm doing it because of this is what people do in this given situation. You put on tefillin in the morning. Why are you putting on tefillin? Did you sit to think? I'll tell you why you're putting on tefillin for most people. It's Chinese parent worship. It's basically habit and sense of comfort zone. You feel you want to be Orthodox. You want to follow your destiny, history. You feel comfortable. And that's what you're doing. So one has to understand that's not what Shevet Yehuda does. You do not want to have mitzvahs anoshim elumad if you do things out of rote and habit. Af shenase eso matzah kazu. Yeah, you may have done it yesterday. He doesn't want to depend on himself on that, but rather Hashem Yair, let God enlighten him. Why I should be putting on tefillin today? Because there's a different you and a different perception of God, and there's a different tefillin. Why are you doing it today? Yes, this is a decision. This is Yehuda. Yehuda is a person which thinks. And because of that, when all of a sudden he gets a desire which is totally illogical and non-controllable, he suddenly realizes, I've trained my mind to think. I do not pick up my head before I think. Everything I do, I think. Where did I get this? All of a sudden, this obsessive, uncontrollable desire. Where did I all of a sudden have this desire? I want to go to medical school. I didn't watch medical movies. What's it called again? Grey's Anatomy, okay, or something like that. It's not that. I'm not into, when I was a kid, there was a Ben Casey, I remember. This was a famous doctor. I don't want to be a detective because I watched Perry Mason or whatever it be. No, suddenly I have some desire. I want to be a doctor. And it says, I really want to go to medical school. You know what that is? Well, if you're a trained person which is trained to thinking and trying your best, not to just do things out of rote, but only because it makes sense. And all of a sudden, a desire which is beyond it's there, man. It's nagging on you. That is a simon that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the chor, the vacuum that you are to fill, and that is your kavod shamayim. You will find kavod shamayim in medicine. And if you are suddenly dragged into, you want to become, I don't know what, a Melamed Torah. Why do you want to be a Melamed Torah? You never thought of it, you didn't want to. And then all of a sudden, this becomes part and parcel of what you do or you are. And you're used to thinking and deciding, I will do this if it makes sense. And all of a sudden, they have vacation. Not because they went to NCSY Kolel and I feel I have to pay back to society, blah, blah. Not because this is social status in the world, which I respect. Those are all logical things which are quite subjective. But rather, it's an obsessive desire, and I'm drawn to it. Simply, that's the way it is. This is your key. That's what God wants you to do. This is the taiva which is beyond your control, that was sent through a malach hamamuna taiva that's owned to people like Yehuda. People like Yehuda, which all their lives ask why, and don't live by rote. They don't just dance by achnasas sefer Torah. They think before they dance. They do that. Then people, all of a sudden, there's something which you can't think about. This is a simon from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is a simon from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One has to understand, just to show you, I have here something I'm going to read to you. It's Keser Rosh, it's the Anhagos of Reb Chaim Volozhiner. It's Simon Samartes, make a note of it. It says, how do I know how to make a decision? I'll know I'm hitting the truth. So Reb Chaim Volozhiner wrote, this Talmud Reb Chaim Volozhiner writes in his name, based on a pasuk in Mishlei, it says, V'ani li eitzah. I am the source of good advice. So he says, Likach Eitzim and Atayra Hein Shiyumad B'cheshik Rav. Like, learn, we get into a sugya. Did you ever learn like a 6-hour stretch with no stop? That is less than that is not really learning. A 6-hour stretch where all of a sudden nothing exists anymore. You're in the sugya, man, and you're living there, and you're not walking out of it. And you feel that I really are in. You're living. I need to. I'm the sugya. The sugya is me. We're doing this together. I'm part of it. And again, part of that's. I told you need a minimum 6-hour stretch. If they said that's Lego, it's nice. You get a mitzvah for it. I was zeichen to do this with my Rebbe. There was always 6-hour stretches, and there was never smoking breaks, and there was never coffee breaks. It was zek from 6 to 12 in the morning, knackedik, after davening. There was no such thing as nafsaka. Sometimes it went to 1. And that was even better, a 7-hour stretch. So he says, you're so much into it, you have no other reason, but I have to know the sugya because I have to know the sugya, which is mamish Torah lishma, according to Reb Chaim Volozhiner. You're doing it for the sake of Yediyas and Avodas HaTorah, nothing more. There's no more agendas. When you've walked away from any sense of self outside of a pure bittul of the ani, and you're only into Torah, at that stage, ask yourself, whatever comes to you in your muskal rishon, as ken yaseh, is that tzas Torah. Dr. Chaim Volozhiner, also it's true, this is found in other Lashonis, it's also found in Ksavim Reb Yozel. It's the same idea. The idea is that if you are totally annul the sense of self, and suddenly you're totally enveloped, nothing more than chokhmas elukim. You have nothing else. You're existing in a world of thoughts. That's what you do when you're really into deep learning. The body doesn't interest you anymore. You're living in the svara. That's what you're doing. Okay. Then when you're kulei seichel and bittul of the ani and kulei seichel, and that's all what your mind is thinking about. Then ask, well, what does God want from me now? What you come up, that's what it is. Now it's a hard thing to do, isn't it? So, but it's basically the same idea of Yehuda. Yehuda was living with the seichel. He wanted Das Elohim constantly. He was totally involved in searching what does God want. Well, then if some idea pops up into his head, he doesn't understand what it's doing there, he'll follow it. And that's what we do here. And this is what it says here in this piece. I'm going back to the Seit Yeshorim, where he writes, Va'kavana. I am now in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line from the bottom of that piece going up. Va'kavana. The intent of this is after man has basically divorced himself from any sense of being partial. Then when you are totally living in impartiality of yourself, you're living in a world of das, you're living in a question, you're not saying how to justify your will, but you've learned to make these questions before you have shoichat, as we discussed. Whatever you're doing, you don't even want to get involved in it until it makes sense to you. It's not that you want it, therefore you have to check whether it's good or bad. You'll lose then, he writes. It's only before you want it, before you get involved, you make these questions and decisions. Then he says, very beautifully, Achar shesilek tatzmo, as I need barer, then it becomes very clear, Shachuka, that the obsessive desire, it fell into your heart. It's because that void that you have, every soul has a void, has a hole that it wants to fill. It has a chisaron, which the nefesh wants to fulfill. The covered shemayim, that's his goal in existence, which means that your soul recognizes found in those issues. Whether it be a question of what kind of profession, whether it be a question sometimes of what girl to marry, whether it be a question of I don't know what decisions in life. There's so many junctions where there's no sifra shulchan aruch for. Most of life is junctions where there's no sifra shulchan aruch for goodness sakes. I mean, for those who know shulchan aruch, For those who don't know Shulchan Aruch, they're probably transgressing Shulchan Aruch left and right. I always say over a very famous sman, the beginning of Ilchus Choshen Mishpat, Piskei Haloimdim, Piskei Balabatim, Hem Shnei Hafochim. That's what the smart writes. Don't use your horse sense and intuitive. It's usually not right. That's not the din. No, but naniach that you live with Shulchan Aruch and you live with thought and afal pikein, you think before you do anything, for goodness sakes. Then you realize so if you're drawn to medical school, what do you mean? But Rabbi X says I should be learning. I'm drawn to medical school. I don't know why. Go to medical school. Go to medical school. Because there is where your neshama will find the kvod shamayim that justifies its shlichus and reason of existence. She chesheket kama v'kama yakuz ukavod shamayim lohoitzi mehem al yedei sheyachnisa ma'adam b'kirbay. He will bring them into his experience. La'amidam neichem Hashem, and he will bring those experiences to stand up ramrod straight in front of God and show this is where I see God, and this I have avanav hasaga, and that's why my neshama came to this world. And because of that, that's why you have this taiva. This is an unbelievable thing. So we just learned, before you pray for something, before you pray for anything, you pray so much, especially you're coming Yamin Neruah, Slichas, you're praying. Ask yourself, why do you want this? Why is it necessary? Is there a logic behind it? Why do you want health? Why do you want wealth? Why do you want happiness? Why? And if it's only self-centered because it makes me feel comfortable, then why are you bothering God? Did he promise you a rose garden? Did he promise you comfort? I don't recall the contract. Why would you think he would give you parnasa, brius, nachas? Show me the contract. Yeah, he promised me a geula, but he didn't say how it's going to happen. And the price that we've been paying is a terrible price. But what do you want? Is that the contract didn't say exactly how it's going to be done. He says he doesn't say we're going to be happy all day. I'm living in Israel. Many of us are. We know what this means. Okay? We're looking for covered Shemayim. The agenda is his. The world is his. So let's try to understand. Yes, the world is full of decisions we want to understand. You want to daven? Make sure you're davening for a reason, because that's what your neshama needs. And that's what he goes on and says. He continues, we're talking about the pasuk back in Yeshayahu Lamed Gimel, that I emulate God, but I know that God is the one that carved the vacuum in my soul by chisaron, and I have to find it. So Hashem Shofteini means I can emulate God by being a rational assessor of reality through das. Once I become a shofet, then I can realize that my chisaron is a taiva which comes from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So now I know what my shlichus is. Shadea behira yisavu le'achakika vatzimoin is that clear thinking, which will finally give you an understanding of your chakika, of your whole, of your carving. Vatzimoin v'choshik b'eina mismala. You will understand your obsessive desires. V'acharkach, the next stage of the pasuk is Hashem Melkeinu. What does that mean? So he says, Melucha meramez al koach habchira. Shadam bocher betov u'mo'es bera bepula b'maseh. Memshala u'shlita otam sheinam b'koach habchira u'moshel alehem b'echrichiyut. This is found in multiple places. The source primarily is in Ibn Ezra, in Parshas Vayigash. in the encounter with the brothers of Joseph after his dreams, where they say, they use two verbs. They use the words of Melech and Moshel. Melech meaning monarch, Moshel means ruler. That's already there, and you can look up there the Ibn Ezra, and that is the source with most people not ever seen the Ibn Ezra, and the odds are they never saw the Gra either. A Gra in Mishlei in chapter Chav Zayin Pasuk Chav Gimel. I think it's worth giving the Maramak and the Chal Pachot. Once in your life, you should find and look up the primary source, specifically for Rosh Hashanah, which the avoid is Kabbalah's Malchutz and not Kabbalah's Memshala. Now, what does that mean? So I'm going to say something which is very important. Most people not knowing the Gra from inside quote it halfway and don't quote the whole Gra. Okay, I don't recall if this was sent to you, so I doubt it. I don't think it was sent. But I'm going to read a certain part of the Gra. The Gra in Mishnah, as I said before, it's in Perek Chav Gimel, Pasuk Chav Zayin. That people get together and put their shoulders to be under his authority, and they will with free will give him the crown of monarchy. And then there's a line which is super important. Hamelech ba'atzmo shaveh l'shar ha'am be'echuto. Qualitatively, there is no difference between the king and the subject. He is one of them. But they all accept his authority as a monarch, and accept the yoke of his authority. So a melech has to be two things. He is part and parcel of the group. Qualitatively, he is equal to his servants. Yet the people got together and took one from amongst them and said, "You are our king." Equals you embody our national identity, our history, our value, and so on and so forth. Those who are English among us will understand the affection that they had for Elizabeth of blessed memory. They saw in that fine lady a lady which embodied their history, their honor, their values. She was a proper English lady. Okay, and yes, and people were very, very sorry when she passed on. Honestly, I was too. She was taka Aisha Chashuva. Okay, so now let's understand. But she was just like anybody else. She was actually less English than most English. She was more German, you really want to know. Okay, but she was English. Okay, and they took a regular English family and decided this family will be our ruler. And this family will be our flag and our standard. This family will embody our values, our feelings, our identity, and so on and so forth. And they're respecting themselves through their malchus. How do you do that with God? Is he part of the guys? How do you say that God is a melech if a melech has to be shaveh yachad im ha'am? Lashon of the Groyes, Hamelech ba'atzmo shaveh l'shar ha'am be'echuto. Is God qualitatively the same entity as you are? That's a hanging question because you're about to do a whole 10-day series of Hamelech, Hamelech, Hamelech. God help me, Vosmetis is Hamelech. Oh, yeah, he's one of the boys. He comes to the bowling alley and guzzles beer, and we have a great party on Super Bowl Sunday. Das meint das. Muchach mikan, that the Torah says man looks at himself as nothing more than an expression of God's will and whim. And that's your identity. It is only, you cannot say God is your king unless you preceded by re-identifying yourself. To make life easier to you, I will say you're supposed to say the I that I am is my neshama, and my guf and my emotions are nothing more than a levush, a garment for its expression. But my identity is my chelik elokam imal, my neshama. If you're profounder, That you'll understand that even the guf is nothing more than an expression of chefsever etzoyna yizbarach, as we learned multitudes of times in the Kavanah of Yudke Vavke and the Ramban in Parshas Yisro and the pasuk V'anochi Hashem Elokecha. So what am I? I am chefsever etzoyna. I am be'echus God. And Memele and whoever Soine Chadu, Kimavur and Zerah Kaddish. Yeah. So Shavim. Now I've decided that the source of this whole thing should be my, in that source lies my identity. So Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu means, first of all, you see him Shavah, you see yourself in a certain fashion, Shavah be'echus Kamei HaMelech, and only then you decide that, you know what, in him lies my identity, in him lies my who I am and what I am and what my values are, and then he's your melech. To call him a king, we used to call Elvis a king. Let's make garnish. Be a king, it doesn't mean he controls me and does what he wants with me. That's not a melech, that's a Moshe. Melech HaKadosh means the transcendent God. It's very transcendent because the only way for him to be my king is I also have to see myself as transcendent. Once I identify myself as nothing more than an expression of that transcendent, then the transcendent, which is my source, ultimately in him lies my identity. The Ramban writes this explicitly in Parshas Yisro and also in the Hasaga, in Sefer HaMitzvah Shel Rambam, and the Hasagas HaRamban, a Mitzvah Rishona, he writes it explicitly that, if we can internalize that God is the primary existent, Hoveh Kadmon, Shemimeno HaKol, that all existence comes from him, Bechepso, with his will, Ubiyocholto, with his omnipotence, this is called Kabbalas Oil Malchut Shammai. If you accept that since we are nothing more than his expression of his will and his whim, and you understand that thus the agenda is his, equal to he is your Lord and Master, that is what Kabbalah Shalom Malchut Shammai means. That's Kabbalah Shalom Malchut Shammai. Literally, that means he's your Melech. So in order for him to be your Melech, he has to be Shaveh La'am, you have to be basically nothing more than, he is Hoive Kadmon, Shemimenu Hakol B'chefetz V'yacholet. That's all it is. B'chefetz V'yacholet. V'lachein Hu Elokeinu. I'm quoting a Ramban in Parshas Yisro and the pasuk of Anochi Havaya Elokecha. That is Kabbalah Malchut Shamayim. That's what you're supposed to be doing in Rosh Hashanah, contemplating that you have no meaning outside of being Ritzonei Yisborach. So then you have to ask when you daven, now why do you want to eat? Why do you want comfort? Is that part of you, which is an Eved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Is that part of you which is Shaveh to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Does it want this parnasa? Does it want this comfort? Because you're praying to the Melech HaKadosh. So your tefillas are supposed to be geared towards Melech HaKadosh. And what makes you Melech HaKadosh? Not the body consciousness, but actually the soul consciousness expressed in the body. So if what you're davening is Tzorchei HaNeshama, if what you're davening is Nitzrach to your Neshama, it's part of what your Neshama needs to fulfill its gap. That is a tefillah which is shaykh to Malchus HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if it's a tefillah about tzrachim of the guf, which has nothing to do with the tzorach of the neshama, what's it got to do with God? Why would he talk to you? He talks to you because your neshama comes in this world to fill a gap of kavod shamayim, and you say, I need X and Y to fill that gap of kavod shamayim. I feel that my kavod shamayim lies in I don't know what, to be a researcher of cancer. Okay, so I need that which is possible. I should be a shomer Torah of mitzvahs and leimer Torah be'iyun and b'archava, and to be a tremendous researcher. Therefore, I need a certain amount of comfort. I need a certain amount of parnasa. I need a certain amount of yeshiva das. I need a certain amount of refuah. Oh, I need this to fulfill my purpose. So that's your neshama talking to its melech. But if not, you're not talking to the Melech, you're talking to a Moshel. You know what a Moshel is? Someone extraneous outside of your species, which basically decided to control you. It's like Stalin, which was a Georgian, basically was a dictator over the Muscovites, over the Russians. He's not mimin hanim shanishlotim. They didn't vote him in. He wasn't bebchira. He controlled them. That's what the Gra continues and writes. So Moshe, Hushamal Chusay Boila Bebchinas Moshe, Shu Gibor Mikula. Kovash Oretz O Uma Achas, Shiyu Tachas Memshaltoy. That's what we say, Kila Hashem HaMelucha Umoshel Bagoyim. So the Gra writes, God has Melucha. Why? Because we are capable of seeing ourselves as nothing more than Yitzires of HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'cheftzai v'yecholta. And we choose that therefore in him lies our identity. Kila Hashem HaMelucha. But for all the nations of the world which do not see things that way, all the nations of the world which may not even have the kelim to know about that. He's not their Moshel, he's Melech, he's their Moshe, Umoshel Bagoyim. Kila Hashem HaMelucha, by Klal Yisrael, or by those who think Umoshel Bagoyim. And the prayer is Vaya Hashem LeMelech Al Kol Haaretz. Ultimately in history, all of humanity will recognize that he is Hovei Kadmon Shemimenu Al Kol Becheptzo V'Yecholto. And V'chein, that's why he's our Melech. That's the tefillah of La'asid Lavai. V'Haya Hashem LeMelech Al Kol Haaretz. V'Yem Ahui Niyeh Hashem Echad V'Shmo Echad. And so on and so forth. You should think about this every time you say Aleinu. This is the major theme of the tefillahs of Asher Shemei Tshuva and Rosh Hashanah specifically. So this is the idea of God being this Melech. This is what it means when I say that God is he's my identity. That's where I lie. So we talk about Bechira, we talk about Hashem Malkeinu. How is he my God? Because I exercise my free will. Hashem Malkeinu. Why? I'm going back to the Seg Yishorim. Again, he says, V'achreze, in the third column of the Seg Yishorim, in the fifth line, V'achreze Hashem Malkeinu Melucha Meramez Al Koach HaBchira. Now you know why. That's what Melucha is. I have chosen you. Koach HaBchira she'adam bocher b'tov u'mo'es bara b'pu'ula u'b'maaseh. So you can also be a melech. A melech means to say what? Malkeinu, it means to say you also understand that your capability of choice is something which makes you a melech. You make choices. U'moshel aleim be'moshel memshala u'shlita al otam she'inam b'koach HaBchira u'moshel aleim be'achrichiyut u'melucha u'mekabel amlucha miyad b'alei b'chira shebachru himnuchu b'rtzonam. Now, what does this mean for you in your avodas Hashem? So he comes and says something which is unbelievable. Remember, we're talking a person which is growing. The topic here is called assessment and growth. Here, there are literally a ladder of stage by stage of avodas Hashem, of how to grow. Stage number one was never do anything before you think. Simple as that. Stage number two is, and that's quite possible. I'm an old horse already. It's attainable. Mamish attainable. I think I've told you people multiple times the story. I'm going to say it over again. I learned this from my Rebbe, the Bracha of Zisla Broida. There was a time in 1968 we had a snowball fight outside Kevin Yeshiva. It was a big snowfall in the winter there. And I was out there, and a friend of mine, which today is a very big Rosh Yeshiva, let him have a for Shlemi and the Parkinson, threw a snowball at me. Now I'm for Chicago, so I'm used to snowballs. I ducked. Then I turned around and see where did it go. It hit him in the face. He was walking from his house to his office in Yeshiva and slammed him right there. I just looked at it, was like unawe. He didn't move his head. He continued moving straight. Now, that ain't normal. So like 15 minutes later, I walk into the office because we were Chavrusa, I was learning. He says, "Oh, you're a bit late." I says, "Well, yeah, you got hit by a snowball." He says, "Oh, you saw?" I says, "Yeah. Wow. Why didn't you move your head?" He looked at me and says, "What would I have gained? What would I have gained? Except for shaming somebody, what would I have gained? Doing a split second react, an iota of time. He didn't do the normal knee jerk, movement. No, he went straight. That means the mind can control. You don't do things unless they make sense. That's the biggest share I ever learned from my Rebbe Zechat Tzaddik Livracha. Where's it coming from? What for? What's this to do? You're a behemoth. Be a baldas. That's called the Talmid Chacham Sheish B'Deya. You understand? Less than that is not called the Talmid Chacham Sheish B'Deya. And the Gemara says what it says about people like that. Das says das. That his value system totally controls him, and he won't do it unless it makes sense. That's step number one. Step number two, once you've attained that, you can finally know where you really should be going. And now you can start praying for it. Step number three is, and this is what we're doing now, Yidbarag Gam Kem Shehu Atzmo HaBchira Umiyad Hashem Yitbarach Ki Lo Yeh Efshar Klal Lintot B'Bchira Zu Ki Ha'inyanim Shebachar Adam Hem Ma Shechaser Lo L'Shorach Ha'Chaim Shelo. If a person follows this way of thought, this way of life, and doesn't do things without thinking, and is constantly searching for what he's drawn to naturally, then he'll realize that most of his bechiros he was drawn to, because that's his shorish haneshama. And if you were drawn to learning Torah all day, or drawn to going to medical school, or drawn to, I don't know, being oisik with tzochatziv be'amuna, that was also God sending you a little malach hamamuna ala taiva, and that's how you made your decisions. This applies only to the person who lives constantly bedas, that doesn't move his head when he gets hit by a snowball. So that's the Seder HaAvodah. He says, "V'zeh shesiyam hakasav v'hu yoshienu shekol eile mitzad habirurim." These three things of being a thinker, looking for what the gap you're missing, realizing that even your decisions are part of that taiva, which because you thank God you're a thinker, and then God sent you that capability, those ideas. This is what you have to do. But the Yeshua, ultimate salvation, is Hashem Yisbarach. V'al seder hazeh isa b'gemor yefane v'yitol yodav v'yikrat fiyashma v'chachi yispala. Kishishin is by b'sefer me'ashilech. He writes, this is a very important sentence. We're about to spend the time of davening. Ki kol zehem hakdamos. All these three stages are stages which are needed. Sheyicholet litpalel al tzorchei haguf. You want to daven with tzorchei haguf? You first have to do this. Yefane hanesh yistalek min hamoisros. Walk away from things which are not needed. Think only rationally. What do I need it for? V'yitol yadav haino yisilik hanegiyos. That's reminding me of certain imagery. You wash your hands from it. Go for things that make sense. Wash your hands from being partial.
To drive people around.
The next stage is only afterwards. Kabel oil malchus shamayim, which is Kriya Shema, and finally Yisachreze Yispalel L'tzorcho Hu B'Shvil She'em Shayichim L'Chelko, because you're down for things you really do need. Your soul needs to fulfill its shlichus. Hu B'Koach La'achlis B'Kirbo. That's what you should be davening for. So we just learned, I think it's an unbelievable roadmap. I've been following this for God knows how many years. This is something which you can only start with this and start thinking and learning more about it. I mean, the whole Tanya is based on this idea. The whole Tanya is based on the idea that godliness lies in thinking and not in experiencing, not in feeling. And if we don't think, we are basically living with our animal instincts and not with our godly soul. You say the Yeratzin before Tefillin. It says over there, you pray that Neshama shebemoichi is the soul which expresses it in your mind. That's Meshubah Avodas Hashem. People somehow think that the soul is emotion. Well, there it says, and that's clear in the whole book of Tanya, says that Nefesh Elokis is in the Moyach. Capability of abstract thought, transcendent thought, and that's the key to making a real bechira, to knowing what you should be needing ultimately to davening. We should have, I guess we're not going to meet before Rosh Hashanah, so Ksiva, Chsim, and Taiva. If I'm not mistaken, the next time we convene is Sunday before Yom Kippur.